Well, today you are in for quite a treat with my guest, who is Coach Tenny. And Coach Tenny is vegan. She does it for the food, for the animals, for the environment. And with that, we're just going to jump right in. How are you, Coach?
Are you ready to live the life you deserve? Do you want to feel vibrantly healthy and reach your optimal weight without dieting while being kind to animals and the planet? Then you're in the right place at the right time. Get ready to hear from doctors, nutritionists, experts, and everyday men and women committed to creating a powerful life in mind, body, and soul through ethical food choices. Welcome to Plant-Based Eating for Health with your host, certified plant-based nutritionist, Kathleen Gage.
Great, Kathleen. Thanks for having me.
You betcha. Well, let's start with a little background on when you gave up animal products in your diet. Some people I've talked to, they started from birth. I know a few people who started from birth. Myself, I was 64 when I went plant-based, and then I became vegan. So what's your story behind that?
Sure, yeah. So I went vegan about 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It started when I went vegetarian when I adopted my dog, and she just turned 8 years old. So she was about a year old, and I decided, because I have such a strong bond with her, I started thinking, why do we eat some animals but not others? And really just started questioning the whole thing. So I just went vegetarian. Seemed like the right choice at the time. And of course, I didn't know anything about the dairy industry, the egg industry. But once I figured that out, I actually had a conversation with a former coworker whose daughter was vegan in passing. And he just told me, there's a lot of cruelty in the dairy and egg industries. And I had absolutely no idea. So once I started researching, it was really overnight for me. It became really clear that this was the right way to go. So really, as an ethical vegan, people call it ethical vegan.
Right.
I'm really doing it for the animals, personally. So.
I think for a lot of us, like myself, when I started, I was plant-based, and I would not call myself vegan because I thought vegans were crazy. And now I know we are, but in a good way. And I just read a post today on Twitter about the vegan cult. And it's like, oh my gosh, kindness is a cult. But if it is, I'll join that cult. But when I first started, I didn't really understand what it meant to be vegan. I really thought vegetarian and vegan were one and the same. So for people who are fairly new to this, or they're exploring the idea of giving up animal and dairy, can you explain to them your aha around the difference between vegetarianism and veganism?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, when I went vegetarian, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought, I was no longer contributing to cruelty and violence toward animals. Once I realized that in the dairy industry, mothers are separated from their calves. We're taking the milk that's for the baby calves, things like that. I started really thinking about that and wondering, okay, is this the right thing to do? And then there's a lot of cruel acts that are happening in animal agriculture. So, sometimes people bring up small farms and things like that. But if you're trying to feed all of these people, we turn toward animal agriculture just based on the numbers. So it's unsustainable. And then once you start learning more about that, you start learning about your health and the health benefits of eating plant-based, and then obviously the impact on the environment. So really just all of the reasons made sense to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I actually live in a rural community, and there's a lot of farms around and a lot of ranches. And you drive down from where I live to the first store that you're going to find of any substance, and it's about a 7-mile drive past beautiful land pastures, and there's cows and there's sheep and there's goat. And it's so interesting because people go, oh, those are happy cows. And, they lived a happy life. So when they die, they've had a happy life. And it's like, death is death is death. And the reality is that's about 1%, even if that, of animal agriculture.
Right.
A lot of people have the misunderstanding of what animal agriculture really is. They think it's open pasture and, all the happy animals. So When you work with your clients, first of all, let's talk about what you do with your clients. And are you a nutrition coach? Are you a health coach? Are you a vegan coach? How do you frame all that?
Sure. So I call it lifestyle coaching.
Okay.
Because I feel like there's a lot of people in the industry that are really doing a lot of health and nutrition focused coaching, which is great. But not a lot of people specifically telling people, okay, how do you actually make this transition? And how do we break that down for you? So I do a little bit of everything. I have a nutrition certificate and I also have a plant-based culinary certificate. So I can talk to people about both of those things. But really, it's again, just how do you make those lifestyle changes on a daily, weekly basis? How do you make that transition? Some people can do it overnight, some people can't. So I think it's important to work with the person where they're at on their journey.
Absolutely. And you actually got the eCornell certification.
Yes.
I got that too. And it's interesting because I've had my business nearly 30 years now. And when I went plant-based and then when I realized I'm actually vegan, I thought, okay, I need to be a nutritionist. That's what I need to focus on. So I went through the eCornell course, which is amazing. And what I quickly realized is there are people like yourself who are very much within your sweet spot when you're doing that kind of coaching. For me, it just wasn't a fit. It was like, okay, I want to be able to refer people over to somebody like a Coach Tenny, rather than me work with them on that level. Mine is all about marketing and visibility. So with that in mind, somebody comes to you and they're brand new to all this. What are some of the first steps that you take them through so that they realize there's going to be a change, but it's not going to be so overwhelming that it really breaks them?
Sure, yeah. And I talk about this in my Vegan 101 course that's available. And that's really a self-guided course. So if someone doesn't want to do one-on-one coaching, they can purchase the course, go through the 5 modules. But really what we talk about there is starting with what you know. So for example, if you already eat certain meals that are plant-based, you can stick to those. And then if you eat certain meals that are not 100% plant-based, you just have to think about, what do I have to swap to make this work? And it's usually 1 or 2 swaps, usually a protein source, maybe a fat source. And so it's really not as overwhelming once you break it down. So for people that are also really nutrition and health focused, maybe fitness focused, you can think about like the macros, like, okay, I'm getting my protein, I'm getting my healthy fats, I'm getting my healthy carbs. And those are the 3 that you focus on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for people that are not as familiar, you can think about it as, I need to have a protein source, like let's say tofu, and then some type of grain, maybe some brown rice, and then your mixed veggies or something like that. And then once you break it down, people are a little bit, more understanding of, okay, this isn't a complete change from what I'm eating. I already eat pasta and I already eat rice and I already eat veggies, right? It's just thinking about what is it that you're eating that you have to swap.
And it's interesting because a lot of times people think they have to make these dramatic and drastic changes. And in reality, they're very simple changes. And you just start by adding more plants to your diet. Now, you mentioned macros or micros, one of the two. What's the difference? What are micros and what are macros? Because, people hear that, but we're not real clear on exactly what that is.
Yeah, so I think people, when they're focused on their fitness goals specifically, they'll talk about macros. And so you're talking about, again, your protein, your fat, and your basically carb source. And for us, you want to really focus on a healthier, fat and carb source, which is easy when you're doing plant-based, because when you're doing animal-based products, all of the fat is coming from, animals, and it's not good for you. It's not good for your heart. But when you're doing something like, let's say, an avocado toast, or, you're switching from cream or using coconut milk instead for like a soup or something cream-based. So it's really easy to do that, actually. And then you feel a lot better and you feel healthier. And so you're still hitting your macros but in a healthier way.
Well, I know the probably the number one question you get, because I've been asked this before, is like, well, where do you get your protein?
Right.
And people really do have a misunderstanding of how much protein there is in a plant-based diet. So how do you address that with people who say, well, I'm not getting enough protein? Where do you take them on that?
So I like to just have people think of it as focus on the 2 or 3 types of protein that you can get per meal. And so for some people, they're confused at first because they think, wow, that sounds like a lot. It's actually not. So let's say you're having a grain bowl, and you're doing, a mix of brown rice and quinoa. So quinoa has a lot of protein. You're having some broccoli in there that has a lot of protein. And then you can do like a tofu or tempeh, or maybe like a soy rizo or something, whatever you like. Chickpeas, lentils, there's just so many options, right? So mixing them all together and just really focusing on each component having some protein really helps. And if you do that for each meal, you're probably going to surpass your daily amount that you need. So,
and one thing a lot of people don't realize is that we have been fed a lot of garbage by the meat industry, by the dairy industry, of how much protein we actually need. That I used to be a bodybuilder in my 30s, and we're going back many, many years. And I remember that at that time, this is how I would get my protein. I would blend up a can of tuna fish and I would drink it. And it's like, I think about that now and I go, oh my God, how unhealthy was that? And yet I was convinced that the more I lifted weights, the more protein I needed, which, you do, but not as much as we've been led to believe. And you mentioned your 5-week program. And before we talk about that, I want to remind people that you're listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm Kathleen Gage, your host, and I'm talking with Coach Tenny, who is a lifestyle coach. And Coach, you talked about your 5-week program. Tell us about that and how people can actually find more information on you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can visit vegancoachtenny.com. And I have the course right there. It's called Vegan 101, and it's 5 modules. You can take as long as you need. It's supposed to be 5 weeks, but it can, take a little bit shorter amount of time for some people. Some people it takes them longer. And it's really a kickstart to your transition to a plant-based diet or a vegan lifestyle. You're going to learn A to Z what you need to know. So I cover reasons why people go vegan. I cover, how to navigate the grocery store as a vegan or plant-based eater. I have a few recipes in there to get you started. And I also talk a lot about the social aspect of being vegan. And I also have an ebook available about that, because I feel like the social aspect is what holds people back a little bit.
Right.
They're a little concerned about, traveling as a vegan, going to holidays, get-togethers with family and friends, work potlucks, all of that. So that's something I address in my ebook as well.
Awesome. Well, in a few weeks, I'm actually headed out to Cleveland, Ohio for the National Health Association conference. And I'm working with them on their virtual side of the conference. And what I love about that conference is you don't have to worry about eating plant-based at all, because all of the meals are plant-based with no SOS, which that's another area. It's like there's all these layers that people get to go through. They can say, oh, I have to go through it, or I have the opportunity to go through it. Talk to us about the no SOS model of the no salt, oil, and sugar model that I think it's Dr. Furman that really started that. And, several doctors subscribe to that, others not so much. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it really, again, it depends on the person and their journey and why they're doing this. So if you're doing this for health, or you've already had a health issue, the no SOS makes sense, because you're taking out the salt, oil, sugar, which again sounds really daunting at first, but it's actually not. So for example, I've been trying to help my dad with some of his health issues, and I'll cook for him. And so instead of cooking with oil, use some water or maybe some no sodium veggie broth, for example. And then you're just using a lot of spices and herbs to make things flavorful. And and it's just really, once you start doing that, you realize like, okay, we actually don't need this added oil. It's not good for us and our heart. And it has a lot of calories as well that people are trying to avoid. So it's really overall great for everyone. But if you're not there yet, especially when you're first making a transition, it's understandable.
Right, right. Well, you talked about navigating the grocery store, and yesterday I do bi-weekly, or actually twice a week, grocery shopping, so I can get my fresh fruits and all that, and fresh veggies. But every time I go to the grocery store, I have to say I'm very shocked and I'm saddened by what I see, because it seems to be getting worse and worse with people's health. And to watch people struggle to get out of their vehicles, to watch them at an age that is probably 20 years younger than I am, they're using walkers because of their weight. And this is not a judgment call, but it's a sad state of affairs that we have gotten so unhealthy as a culture. And now, seeing children that are obese, because I'm not even sure what the percentage is, but I think it's 35 or 40% of children are now obese, which we're not giving them a fair shake at life. So when you work with your clients on navigating the grocery store, what are some tips that you can give people that, I'll share one thing that happened to me yesterday. I have a propensity to bagels, and I make sure they're the egg-free and all that, but I know that bagels are not really that good for me. And when I go to the grocery store, my MO is, I'll treat myself with this one bagel, and I eat it on the way home. And yesterday, it really occurred to me that it's a decision that you make in a moment. It's like, okay, just avoid the bagel department. That's what you need to do. And, or whatever, it could be the Ritz crackers, it could be the Oreos, whatever it may be. It's just making that decision. But when you work with your clients, how do you help them to navigate the grocery store?
Right. Again, so it's going to be a little bit tailored to the person. But if we're talking about health, you do want to focus more on the produce aisle. You want to focus on getting things as fresh as you can, but also you can get frozen veggies and fruit as well. And so you want to focus on that. You want to focus on your legumes, your lentils, your beans, tofu, of course. I like to promote like plant-based milk, like unsweetened organic soy milk is what I use at home. So there are a few aisles that you want to focus on. And again, maybe, you want your bagel once in a while. That's okay too. I need this to be a sustainable change for people, right? I don't want people to feel like, they're restricting me even more now. So I think it's good to balance and kind of have that healthy relationship with food as well. So it's perfectly fine if you're, getting your bagel once a week. But if you're eating whole food plant-based the rest of the time, then you're doing yourself a great favor for your health.
Right, right. And, in that whole thing about sustainability, when we really look at the animal production, food production, that is not sustainable. We're cutting down the rainforests. We're destroying the earth, the environment. You can look at the climate change, and, people that deny climate change, it just boggles my mind. It's like, turn on the news for a minute. But where do you see the general population going around plant-based eating, around veganism? Where do you see that in 5 to 10 years?
I think we're seeing a lot of people embracing this more. I'm hearing more people doing like meatless Mondays at home. I'm seeing people try out vegan options at restaurants, or even in the grocery store, they're picking things up. And so it's great. I'm seeing more accessibility and affordability as we're rolling out more products. And so again, it's great for people to have those swaps available, especially when you're first transitioning. And it's great to be able to travel with people and eat at different restaurants and have those vegan options. So again,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's going in a positive direction. I think we need to do a lot more in terms of the systemic change that needs to happen, especially for, let's say, in education, like with kids, what are they being fed in school? That can lead into the obesity crisis as well.
Right.
So things like that. And what are we even teaching them about health and nutrition as well?
Well, on health and nutrition, with the clients you work with, you're a lifestyle coach. Do you focus on movement and exercise too?
So I think everything needs to be a holistic approach. So mental health is really important to me. It's something that I've dealt with. So I like to talk to people about just really having a holistic approach, thinking about your mental health, thinking about your exercise. And again, it's going to be different for everyone.
Right.
Everyone has different abilities and needs. So yeah, just really thinking about overall health, because it's all interconnected. So I've seen people, change the way they eat, and then all of a sudden they feel better overall. Maybe their mental health improves. Maybe they're taking a daily walk. That's also helping with mental health. So it's really all connected.
Well, that is so true what you just said about, once they start eating this way, they start feeling better and they feel like moving. Before we came on this call this morning, I went out to the river and had a couple of mile run, and I do that on a regular basis. And my whole philosophy is I want to use it while I have it. And the old adage of use it or you'll lose it, which is so true. But for me, it's like I feel so blessed at my age. I'm going to be 69 in about 8 days. And, at my age that I'm out running near the river, it's like, well, I never thought it was going to be that way, but it's because I eat plant-based that happens. So with your business, you use the word vegan in your business. And I know that for a lot of people that move into the vegan space and they want to work primarily with people who either want to become vegan or plant-based, or they already are, but for some reason they're afraid to use the word vegan. My business is Vegan Visibility. I have a business associate. We have Vegan Visibility Productions. And I was warned, do not use that word, but I was warned by non-vegans. And what's interesting is, for me, by using that term, I do attract vegans. So what has been your experience about using vegan in your business name, and what made you decide to use it?
Yeah, I think it's very important to use the word. I think people have a lot of misconceptions about the word. They don't really understand it, which is why, again, in my course, I start off with definitions, like what is vegan, what is plant-based, what is whole food plant-based. People don't really know the difference, right? And we can't blame them. They're just not familiar. So the first part is really just trying to educate more people about that.
Right.
And yeah, I do attract vegans, but it's always good because they know non-vegans. They know people that in their life they want to eat plant-based or go vegan for different reasons, maybe health, maybe for the animals. And so that's a good referral source for me, but also it's just important for me to promote something that I believe in. And so again, even if someone is not going 100% vegan, they can still work with me. Maybe you want to go dairy-free. I've seen a lot of clients who have issues where it's, they're breaking out. Maybe they're allergic to certain things, and they think maybe the dairy could be a culprit for that. So I help people to get off dairy as well. So there's just different things that people need, and it's very specific for each person.
Right. You're probably more compassionate than I am. And that's why I didn't make a good nutrition coach, because when they say, do you think it might be the dairy? It's like, do you think? Yeah, of course it is. But, and actually yesterday when I was at the grocery store, I get so many ideas for stories and blog posts and podcast episodes from going to the grocery store. But there was a young man, he probably was about 16 or 17, terrible acne. And I was walking behind him with my cart, and I was watching what he was putting in his cart. And I thought, if you got rid of all of that, your acne would probably clear up. You would probably have more energy. And, and I have a client who actually has been on my podcast show, Linda Middlesworth, and she's 79 years old. And she said she can always tell how if a man's eating cheese. And I said, how can you tell? And she goes, he has man boobs. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. But I actually look for that now. It's like, oh, you eat cheese, you eat cheese. So with the whole idea of people becoming healthier, how soon does somebody notice a change when if they go into your 5-week program or they go to one-on-one coaching with you? How soon do they notice a change?
Yeah, that can vary as well. For some people, it can take a couple of weeks. For some people, it can take, just a few days. It really depends on what your current situation is. So some people come to me and they're pescatarian. So they're already not eating a lot of the things that are causing people problems. But it could be something like the dairy that they're eating that's causing them a lot of issues. And they tell me how much better they feel and how great they feel just after a couple of weeks. So it really depends. But it also takes a while, again, to make a lifestyle change and make it sustainable.
Okay.
So I want people to be really compassionate with themselves as well. So we talked about compassion, but yeah, we're compassionate with other people, but we also have to have that for ourselves too.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because human nature is that we do tend to beat ourselves up. Just when we're getting to a level of success, we'll do something to sabotage it. And then we say, oh, well, I already messed up. And myself, I'm in recovery. I've been sober for 39 years. And so I know that there are certain checks and balances that you put in place so that you live on the straight and narrow. And with eating plant-based, you might falter a little bit. And I know once we identify as vegan, we're really clear on what we don't do ever again. Like for me, I could never, ever eat any animal products. It's not in my DNA anymore. And I had a visceral response at the grocery store about 6 months into being plant-based, where I felt the pain and suffering. It was like, oh my gosh, I did not realize. And in your experience, Coach Tenny, how much does the way we eat and the elimination of animal and dairy products from our diet, how much does it impact our consciousness, our mindfulness, and maybe even our spiritualness?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've heard from people that it really does have an effect. Like it makes you feel like a kinder person, which might sound strange, but once you are at peace with yourself, and this is how I feel personally, I just feel very at peace and very free. Some people think you're going to feel restricted, but I feel very free actually. And once you feel that, you can radiate that into the world and you can share that with people, your loved ones, for example. And they're going to feel that you're happy and you're kind and you're nice and you're not, internalizing all of this pain and suffering.
Right.
That we're getting from these animal products.
Well, you mentioned family, and I know that for a lot of people, myself included, my spouse is not vegan. And so at times it does bother me. And yet I have to understand everybody goes at their own pace. So how do you work with your clients who they've committed to it, they're 100% vegan, whole food, plant-based, and yet their family members are not? Where do we draw the lines? Like, I don't buy meat products at all anymore. I just won't do it. But some people do. They say, well, it's for my spouse or it's for my kids.
Right.
How do you work with your clients to help them to navigate that?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I mean, that's again a personal choice. Like for me, when I go to the grocery store, if my mom says, hey, can you pick up some meat product or something, I'll say no. And so that's just a boundary that you have to set and you have to have those conversations. And I think you have to be understanding of them. Again, non-judgmental. They're going through their own journey and maybe they'll never get there and they'll never be vegan or plant-based.
Right.
But you can also just share more food with them and share great recipes. And I think that's what people respond to the most is, wow, okay, seeing that something is vegan and it's really just blows their mind and it's amazing and delicious. And that's really the number one way that I've been able to convince people to try more vegan food, right? So I think that's kind of a boundary thing. And also you want to be open-minded. And then they have to be open-minded too.
Right.
They have to respect your boundaries. So.
Right. Because, I actually have somebody who is a friend, and I had to have a real frank talk with them because they were joking about bacon. They were joking about, I'm going to have ribs and all that. And at first I just kind of laughed it off. And finally I said, I don't know if you realize it, but when you say that, it really does hurt me. I said, you're criticizing and making fun of something that's very important to me. And they stopped doing it. And what was interesting is they actually had a medical crisis that their doctor said, you need to give up meat and dairy. And it's like, yes. And so they said, well, I think I'm coming to your side. It's like, yes. But in your business, what would you say? Because I know that we have people who listen who are looking for strategies on how to grow their business within the vegan space. What would you say is your best strategy for growing your business?
I think the best strategy is to be authentic, especially online on social media. You want to be yourself. You don't have to be a perfectionist. I worked in social media and marketing for over 10 years, and there are a lot of rules. And sometimes you have to break the rules, and sometimes you just have to be your messy self. And people who resonate with it will follow you and like you, and people who maybe are not as on board with that strategy won't. And so it's really about finding your people in your community, especially online. So.
Okay. Well, Coach Tenny, in closing, what are your final thoughts for people?
I just want people to be open-minded when they're trying veganism or trying to eat plant-based. Again, it's not going to happen overnight for everyone. Be kind and compassionate to yourself and to others around you. And yeah, just happy eating.
Okay. And your web address again?
It's vegancoachtenny.com.
All righty. And we'll put that in the show notes. And this has been delightful. Thank you so much, Coach Tenny. And to those of you out there who are watching and listening, thank you so much, because without you, we couldn't do what we do. This is Kathleen Gage with the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. Have a great day, a great evening, a great middle of the night, whenever you may be consuming this.
Thank you for your commitment to an ethical life through plant-based food choices. The kind of choices that are kind to your body, the environment, and most of all, animals. Be sure to leave a review and rating of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show.